I think some people think it's far-fetched, but it's true. It's like what we see demonstrates to us like, well, wow, this is possible. And so to me, feeling like the opportunity to bring stories, be they fiction or nonfiction, to screen that will show women, adults, children everywhere what is possible, what is achievable, I think it's important. It's an important step in making real change.
You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. Our presenting sponsor is the entertainment payroll company Extreme Reach. What you may not know about Extreme Reach is that they are already an industry disruptor in the areas of creative asset management and video ad distribution. And now they're poised to disrupt the entertainment payroll business. If you're creating content, you need them. Call them and tell them I sent you. Today I got to speak with Liz Jenkins. Liz is the Chief Financial Officer of Hello Sunshine, the media brand founded by Reese Witherspoon. She tells us all about the company, their mission, their culture. It's as good as you imagined. Liz was formerly the Senior Vice President of Corporate Development and Strategy at Media Rights Capital. While there, she worked on the deal to bring House of Cards to Netflix, which was then written up as a Harvard Business Review business case, and she talks about it here as well. Liz is very much one of the best and brightest, and I'm so happy to have her on the show. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places. And today is launch day for a new podcast called Catch a Break, the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating Hollywood. I will play the trailer at the end of this episode. While you're on your podcast app, go on over to Catch a Break and subscribe. All right, here's my conversation with Liz. Have a listen. What do you do?
I am the CFO of Hello Sunshine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the company.
I think everyone's familiar with the company, but let's talk about it in case they're not.
Yeah. So Hello Sunshine is a multimedia company, studio, content creator, and brand that was founded by Reese Witherspoon about 1.5 years ago. I've been at the company for about 6 months now, and at the center of everything that we do, and I think this is like a really important distinction to make that I like to bold and underline, is we're a very mission-driven company, and our mission is to change the narrative for women through storytelling. And that mission is at the center of every single thing that we do. It's great because it is so important, and people say to me how timely it is, although it's timeless, and it is though long overdue in our industry. But it's great in knowing what you stand for, know, and I think it's something that is in this town where it's, a movie comes out about vampires and suddenly everything is vampires, until people are sick of it. Or suddenly now, after Crazy Rich Asians, people think, oh, we should make movies about that. And it's Hollywood, I think, can be so reactive. And it's really about, I can say we stand for something. There's a woman at the center of every single story that we tell. Mm-hmm. There is an element of hope in every single story that we tell. We are intentional about female authorship as well. And it's in female authorship, not just of the content of the project, is very important, but just, in the stories that we're telling, that they encourage female authorship and agency from our audience. So that is.
I love everything you are saying right now. It's making me so happy.
Yeah, it makes me happy every day. It's one of those roles where I think I'm probably black and blue from pinching myself on a daily basis, that I am blessed enough to be doing what I do every day.
And you're on the leadership team.
Yeah,
so you're helping steer this company.
I am. It's like at times it's like that. It's such an amazing opportunity, but it's like I feel the awesomeness of that responsibility, and I mean awesome in that really heavy way. I feel like the mantra that I heard so much growing up from my mom and my grandfather, who was a civil rights attorney and later a federal judge, was always kind of very serious guy. He used to always say, he's like, to whom much is given, much is required, and that's the way I feel about this. I feel like I've been given a real gift and an opportunity, and as a company, Hello Sunshine, I think that we have been blessed and the product of a lot of really hard work from a lot of people. We've got an opportunity to make a huge difference, and I think we've been entrusted with a ton, and it feels weighty. Yeah,
well, it's a big deal.
So, don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, don't screw it up now.
Exactly.
Let's talk about how you got here. Where did you start?
Where to begin with that? Looking back on kind of my life and career, I would say two things. So one is I realized at a young age, I'm a fairly pragmatic person. I started out actually wanting to be an actress. That was like, I had that debate at the age of 21.
That's so weird for people in LA.
I know, right?
Entertainment.
Yeah,
Crazy.
exactly.
Never heard that.
You never think that. But I always loved it. And there are two things that ran in my family, actually. It was like theater and acting and the law, and
theater and law.
Which are related when you think about it.
They actually are.
It comes in handy for lawyers to be a little bit theatrical sometimes.
And every actor you went to school with was like, I'm probably going to go to law school.
Law school, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I was thinking about doing it, and one of my best friends was coming down to LA, and she's like, are you coming with me? And I said, well, no. The thing is I'm a pragmatist, and you could be amazing, I could be fantastic, which I was not, but there's no guarantee that that's going to equal like success, that effort and talent will yield results. There's no correlation. So I was like, So I ended up moving to Milwaukee and working in finance at GE, which is like the exact opposite. But
in Milwaukee?
Yeah, at GE, at the time it was called GE Medical Systems, which is now GE Healthcare.
Wait, where'd you go to college?
Stanford.
Did you get recruited to GE from there?
It's funny, trust me, I graduated from Stanford in 1999. I'm putting my age out there for all to hear. We may need to edit that part out, but...
You know what? I think we should. I've noticed something about, especially in this town, everyone who is over 30 apologizes for their age, and everybody under 30 is apologizing for their age because they want to be 30.
I know, it's true. It's true. I graduated from Stanford in 99, so it's like the height of the dot-com boom. So most people looked at me like I had two heads when, they were all going to launch different portals. Mm-hmm. Remember the portal craze? Or work at software companies and all this, and I'm going to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm not saying in the Bay Area, to work for GE. Wait, that company, they make light bulbs, right? So I was like, no, well, they do a lot of other stuff.
At some point, they might buy NBC.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody thought I was crazy. And I think the why for me of it was, look, being in the Bay Area, you can't help but get bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. It is just in the water, just the same way everyone here has written a screenplay. Yeah. It's just, you're around it all the time. And so
it's what we do.
It's what we do. And up there, it's we start businesses. And so I really wanted to do the whole startup thing. It seemed super exciting and dynamic. But the pragmatist in me again was well, what do I know how to do? I was an econ major, so I could draw supply and demand curves for just about any situation you could possibly imagine. But it's okay, well, I don't think that company A over there, I'm gonna make much impact doing that. So what kind of struck me was, look, I'm not a technical person, I'm not an engineer. It's gonna come down to luck if I'm gonna make it, in terms of winning the stock option lottery. That's really what it is. I didn't feel what skills do I have? What is the difference that I'm going to be making? What's the impact that I'm going to be making that will help either the success of this company, the growth of this company, et cetera? I was I don't really know how to do anything yet. Let me go, learn how to do a few things, and then maybe at some point, I'll come back to that. And so GE felt like this is a great way to start. It was always on the top of the list of the most respected companies in the world. I'd interned at GE throughout college, NBC actually a couple of times, and GE Capital and GE Corporate in London. So I knew the company really well, and I thought, well, this is going to be a great place to go and understand how do well-run businesses operate. And so as I was deciding, well, what's the right way? And I thought, well, finance was really at the center of everything GE was doing. It wasn't a function that was accounting, where you were kind of in a back office somewhere with a green shade and, you never got to really see the light of day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it wasn't like
Counting
that. It
the
was
beans.
Yeah. No, it was really the partner of the CEO or what have you. And so I went and I spent about 3.5 years at GE doing a couple of their leadership development programs. I traveled the world. It was, incredible. I spent, months working in Beijing and all over Europe and all over the US, and it was just such an incredible experience at the age of 22. I look back and I think that was some of it was wasted on me then, but I think I really did appreciate how special it was. And so then I left GE in 2003 to go to business school. And so now the why behind that was, so at that point I was doing internal audit at GE, and this is right around like Sarbanes-Oxley time. So it's just like the most painful of like audit and accounting.
I was an auditor at that time
Oh, were
too.
you really? Yeah. So
it was painful.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
No. It was really, really tough. And the other thing with GE at that time, and it's interesting because it's something they've kind of modified a bit over the years, but a lot of their locations, because GE was largely an industrial business, and so they were in these cities. It's like Schenectady, New York, Erie, Pennsylvania, and no offense to any of those cities, but I grew up in the South primarily. Like I lasted 6 months in Milwaukee before I was able to get my next 2 rotations in this program in the Bay Area. Yeah. I am not built for snow. This rain in LA that we're having right now is like killing me. But I realized location matters to me was one of my takeaways.
That is a good thing to know.
And for some people it doesn't. Like,
right.
It did for me. And takeaway number 2 was I recognized, I was like, gosh, I really enjoy what I do every day when it's something that I have like a great deal of like personal like interest in, right? Which I think to some degree goes without saying, but I think some people care more than others about that,
Yeah.
And I just recognize, because having spent time working at NBC and doing projects there, and then having also spent time at GE Power Systems in Budapest in the middle of the winter doing inventory for a gas turbine business, I just was like, this is not, it doesn't energize me in the same
terrible.
way. I know, I feel like I'm insulting people who work in this industry now, but it wasn't my thing, And so I just realized, I was like, gosh, it just is, I thought back to my, the days I'd had at NBC there, and I was like, it just was like fun. I could feel it like in my bones. Just that feeling of leaping out of bed in the morning and just thinking about it, and knowing that every time the first I pick up like Fortune magazine or the Wall Street Journal, I would automatically, no matter what business I was working in, the first articles I would read would be about the media and entertainment industry. And it's because I like movies and TV shows,
Fun.
It's fun, it's interesting. So those were 2 big takeaways for me. And so I decided ultimately to go to business school because I felt like, well, this is going to be a good way to transition into kind of media and entertainment. And I hadn't decided, do I want to go straight into that, or do I want to do, professional services like investment banking or consulting? Mm-hmm. And so I went to Penn, and I finished Penn in 2005 with the focus on strategic management and marketing. But you can't leave Penn without doing a ton of finance as well. And so ultimately ended up doing investment banking, both consulting and investment banking at McKinsey, and then investment banking at Credit Suisse. And at Credit Suisse especially, I was focused on media and a little bit of telecom. And, those choices for me, again, was really about building that like foundation. I felt like when working in professional services in the industry, like you are going to spend time serving a bunch of different clients. It's a great way to learn the business. And then as well, they're just kind of fundamental like skills that you build, whether it's at being a consultant and like being kind of a client, working with clients. Client management, I think, is one of the most important things that consultants do, because usually all the answers are with the people who are working there day to day. It's figuring out how to extract that, repackage it.
Present it back to them.
Present it back to them essentially as your own work.
And then you're building this amazing resume with these incredible companies.
Yeah. And it wasn't like, it was one of those things that wasn't intentional. I wasn't like, I want all these blue chip names on my resume. It
Right.
does help, don't get me wrong, because I think people hear, Stanford, Wharton, and they think a certain thing, but it's
you
still
hear little
like
McKinsey, and you're like,
but then you gotta prove it. You know what I mean? It's like it's sizzle, sure, but it's a great network. I think is one of the most incredible pieces of it. And I actually just kind of like, to digress for a minute, it's something I think about a lot every now and then when I'm sitting around like a dinner table or a Super Bowl party, or just hanging out with my friends. Mm-hmm. I just think, what an incredible group of people, impressive group of people, and it's not me, but then it's like, and you think about like, how does that happen? And a lot of it's just because I'm like, because we work together here, or we went to school together here, and it doesn't feel like my network. I don't think about it as my network. I think about it as buddies of mine, but that's, I think, one of the biggest things coming through those experiences, or the people, and it's obvious, but every now and then it just kind of hits me. It's just the people that you build these relationships with and the relationships that they have and the opportunities that subsequently like come your way. And it's every day, not even just, I think, is about jobs. It's just about, business partnerships and deal making. I mean, more often than not, somehow I'm on, I spend half of my day talking to people who are good friends of mine about XYZ deal that we're trying to get done. So in any case, consulting, investment banking, and enjoyed them. But again, I still hadn't abandoned that dream to really like build something and do something. Because I think what was always hard for me with both of those fields is you don't have like the same degree of ownership. Right? Obviously, because it's like if you're a banker, your goal is all you care about is transacting because you make your fees and it's important work. And there are a lot of bankers I love and they are good at what they do. But it's really just about you make your money by transacting, having clients who buy or sell companies and that sort of thing. And it's you're not always aligned with your client in terms of, because you don't have the same understanding that they do of their business and what their business needs, and what might be the right timing and all of that. So I wanted to be connected and to the why piece of it. And thinking about, well, why should we go and merge with this company? Or why should we do X, Y, or Z deal? And then living with the the aftermath of those things, putting the two companies
more
together.
than someone's going to make a bunch of money.
Yeah, I mean that was just to me it was always interesting because I think when I realized, and I always knew this about myself, but every time I'd sit in a meeting with one of the senior bankers I was working with, and I recognized the pages that I was most interested in a deck in writing or thinking through or discussing were the ones about like why this makes sense. Who are the people who, sure, this client of ours has this stock that's way overvalued, and so like they need to go use that currency to do some deals. Well, that's interesting, but it's like, okay, well, who should they and why should they? Versus like the structuring aspect of it. I mean, I found
why does it make things better?
Yeah. It's okay, whether or not you use like, well, how do you tranche out the debt? And could you do this? And do you put a synthetic revolver in? And do you do interesting? It's interesting to kind of learn all that stuff, but that wasn't the part that really got like, my juices flowing that I thought was the most interesting piece. So in any case, circa 2008, and we all know how 2008 was on
a rough year.
The economy, and it was, the banks had been going through layoffs since like fall of 2007. And so
where were you living at this point?
I was in New York. I was living in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Which I still miss Brooklyn every day. And I'd heard you don't want to ever be the first to get laid off just because like it can be hard to find a role and all of that sort of stuff, but you don't want to be the last. You don't want to be there at the end because especially by the time I left Credit Suisse, I think 75% of my class had been let go.
Yikes.
And so
everyone's out on the street.
Everyone's out and it's just the people who are left, it's not that the work has been reduced by 75%. No. So just, the hours are really crazy, and I think I kind of woke up one day and it's like, I think I've gotten what I need to get here. And so I phoned a friend who I had the pleasure of working with when I was at McKinsey. And she was coming out of undergrad at the time, and I'd come out of business school. And we bonded because we were total like entertainment geeks. Like we were doing this because we wanted to, for the same reason, we wanted to build up our kind of knowledge and understanding about the media and entertainment industry. And so she was already out here, and I called her and I said, look, I'd actually had, before I called her, I'd had an interview. A headhunter had reached out to me about a large entertainment company that was hiring, and I'd gone in and had a few interviews, like a round of interviews there. And after I called the headhunter, and I was like, look, they were all really lovely, but I'm not interested. She's like, well, why not? It's a great company, great group. I have friends who work there. And I said, well, because it feels like I'd be doing the same thing as I was doing in banking consulting, just inside of a big company, really disconnected from like what was being done every day, like the product that's being like made and what we're doing. And I want to go in and like get my hands dirty. I want to feel it and be able to like touch it and see what we're doing and not feel like I'm just, spinning PowerPoint decks all the time. Mm-hmm. And so then it was after that I picked up the phone and called this friend of mine, and I said, look, you're out there, you're in LA, I'm ready to come. I do not want to do another New York winter either, but just ping me like names of companies that I may not have heard of, that are smaller, that are really well respected, well capitalized, all of that sort of stuff. And one day she pinged me and said, one of the names she mentioned was Media Rights Capital. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've heard of MRC. I remember there'd been some article in the New York Times around a deal that they'd done with Sacha Baron Cohen for Bruno. And then, a matter of months later, here I was in LA at Media Rights Capital. And I was 2008, and I spent the next 7 years.
Did you start as the CFO of MRC?
No, I didn't start, nor did I end as the CFO of MRC. I was SVP of Corp Dev and Strategy.
Okay.
But yeah, and I started as director of Corp Dev and Strategy, and
Were you in the middle of that House of Cards deal?
I was in the middle of the House of Cards
reverberated all over
deal.
town.
I was.
Can you talk about it at all?
I can. I think what's funny about that deal is it's one of the things that I really love about small companies. And it's that the fact, a lot of times when you're large organizations, I talk about there's a disconnection. There's a disconnect between effort and impact. And when you're at a small company, it's you can often see, and this isn't it's not in an arrogant way that I mean seeing your fingerprints on things, but it's really nice to know on an everyday basis that gosh, if I hadn't been here, this one thing wouldn't have gotten done.
Yeah.
And this one thing is really important. But it's also just knowing that you can throw out a cockamamie idea sometimes and wait, it actually works. And so with the Netflix thing, it was funny because this is an example of that. Well, the whole backstory was I had been given this mandate by our CEOs of we will not deficit finance television, which nowadays it's oh yeah, of course, I don't want to deficit finance television. In 2009, that wasn't a thing. Everyone deficit finance television. There was no such thing as getting paid a premium unless you're doing unscripted, because then with unscripted, typically a network would pay a production company, call it 120, 125% of the cost. Anyways.
Now wait, can you explain that for our listeners who are not finance people?
Yes, sorry. So typically on television shows actual television shows before the days of Netflix and other streaming platforms, what would happen is a studio, who is the person who's kind of developed and owns the idea, goes and pitches a network a show. And they pitch a US network. NBC, ABC, CBS, TNT, TBS, all of those guys. They go and pitch a show to a network. A network then makes them an offer for a license fee. And license fees, this is a third-party sort of situation where you're an external studio pitching to another network. The network will say, okay, I'll pay you a license fee that is X% of your production cost, right? And that's the X% that's typically lower than 100%. So it could be anywhere from 60, 70%, depending on the show, how compelling the package is, et cetera. So obviously you're thinking, well, why would any studio do this deal? Well, the reason they do it is because these shows, you can make a lot of money outside of just that initial network window. So a lot of times, when you travel and you're in France and you turn on Canal Plus and, oh wait, there is
It's Friends.
It's French. Yeah, in French. That's because Warner Brothers, in that example, is the studio on Friends, has licensed that show to networks outside of the US. So when your studio, if you want to think about it as kind of one of those old school thermometers during fundraisers, when you're here, I got to fill it all the way up to the top. You cover a huge slug of it with the domestic initial network domestic license fee, but then you go out to international. You sell it territory by territory. You also would have, historically, you would have had home video, which then obviously a lot of that got replaced by SVOD services. And the big pot of gold initially in the TV business was syndication revenue. So that was, you sell it over and over and over and over again. So that's Friends.
We're still watching Friends.
Mind-boggling. Friends, Seinfeld, The Office, those shows have made massive amounts of money in syndication.
My kids are watching all of them.
Yeah. No, and it's because you have some shows, especially comedies, they could fetch over $2 million an episode. So it's...
And 20 years later.
Yeah. So it's really, that was the business. But what would make it risky is if you think about that syndication pot of gold, I want to say there was a chart that we'd put together years ago, 10 years ago now. I want to say it was it's less than 5%. I want to say it was 4% of shows got syndicated. From pilot down to syndication was 4%. of
Is it
shows.
because you have to make 100 episodes?
Yes, and so that's why, and people are always like, why do people care so much about the 100th episode? That was why. It's because you had to get to a certain...
Because now you're rich.
Yeah, you had to get to a certain number of episodes that people could like air them every day and not have to repeat them. Because imagine if you have 20 episodes and you're airing one episode a day. It's like every month you're showing the same
Every
things.
3 weeks you're starting over.
Exactly. So that was why 100 was kind of the magic number. And so what could typically happen that was really tough for studios, it's interesting, is that usually every year your costs go up because you have to pay talent a little bit more. So year after year, your costs keep going up, and so your deficit could keep going up. So a lot of times the worst thing that could happen is you have a show canceled in season 4 because it's even more expensive than it was costing you in season 1, and you don't have enough to syndicate it. And what's interesting about comedies in particular is historically comedies didn't travel well, meaning they had lower international values than dramas. So you were oftentimes taking these huge swings, knowing that if you hit the ball out of the park, like you're Chuck Lorre, or you have like Friends or Seinfeld or whatever, billions of dollars of value. But you have a lot of shows that aren't those shows.
So you have to have enough to make your odds better.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was the bet that a lot of studios were making. Well, we at MRC we're small. We're only
not about
making,
to make 10 sitcoms.
Yeah, and we're not about to risk that much money. And so the whole mandate was, okay, well, we got to make deficit-free television. It's like, okay. All right, so I just remember sitting and like thinking through, how do we, And one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Friday Night Lights. And I remembered how when NBC at one point, the show was kind of on the bubble ratings-wise. They couldn't really make the numbers work, and so to do it, they did a deal with DirecTV, where DirecTV, I don't know if you remember this, DirecTV on the Audience Network got an initial window. So in the fall, the show would be on DirecTV, and then in the spring, it would be on NBC. And I remembered that because I love the show. I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting structure. What if we did something like that? And who could we do it with? And then this was around the time, Netflix was still mainly, they had a bit of streaming, but it was, mainly the mail business. And like, it was something where I think Jeff Bewkes was always talking about like Netflix and all the time. And Netflix was there was something publicly, I think either Reed or Ted had said, they're like, look, we're not trying to compete with Comcast. We're not trying to compete with Time Warner Cable. We're like HBO, And so it's like, okay. So you can probably guess where this light bulb is going. So you're thinking, I'm like, oh, well, they're like HBO or they're like a cable network. They're going to need to get into the original content business eventually. Yep. Everybody's going to. I'm like, maybe Netflix. And so I added to my list of like potential, and we called them emerging platforms at the time, people who could be part of, maybe we can do something where they get an early window or concurrent window, or we can pre-sell that window. And again, at this point in time, when I'm thinking about this, they did not have the subscribers to be able to even contemplate like a show that size. And also, when I was thinking about this, it was before House of Cards was where it was. It was just more like, oh, this could be an interesting part of the structure. So that is kind of the seed of the idea that came together. It took us like a while to get there, and then all the stars aligned, where we had just such an incredible package with House of Cards. It was the biggest show for our studio in terms of kind of talent and dollars, and the timing, and Netflix had grown like gangbusters from the original seed of the idea. And it all worked out well.
It was a big upset for HBO.
It was. I remember, it's funny, there's actually an HBS case that they wrote, Harvard Business School, case that they wrote on MRC and our decision to do this. And it was interesting because it was one of those things we like very much debated internally. Because there was, on the one hand, we had 2 shows on HBO at the time. We had the Life and Times of Tim and the Ricky Gervais show were on HBO. Right. At the time, and we were concerned that if we said no to HBO and gave the show to Netflix, would those shows still be on the air?
And didn't
Which they're not. You can guess what happened.
Risk reward. It also seemed, and I don't know if it's because of it seemed like HBO shows were no longer then showing on Netflix after that.
Well, HBO shows, the interesting thing was HBO shows weren't really on Netflix. So what happened was, because HBO was very prescient in this way, their deal terms specifically precluded and it was very rare, that they would license content from external studios, but it typically would name Netflix as like, you can't put your show on Netflix. So some of what happened when you see some of those premium shows on there, they may have been deals that were done with third parties before Netflix existed and could be named. It cannot be on any like subscription services. But yeah, they are, and a lot of us too, like you remember Starz had a deal with Netflix briefly. They're always odd when they end up, when you see those types of shows that come from premium networks on the streaming services, because typically it's either like the Starz deal or Epix, where they've been able to kind of sublicense those shows to a streaming platform, or it's been because they're from an independent studio who was able to like hold back those rights.
Wow.
But
now that everyone has their own streaming.
Yeah, exactly.
But I remember that moment because it also signaled to the industry that these emerging platforms were here to play. They weren't doing cheap little digital new media, whatever. They were doing big.
And that was the thing, honestly, for us. And I can't remember if this all made it into the business school case, but in real life, when we were thinking through it and talking about it, and to me, it's one of the neatest things about this and how it turned out. Because very rarely when you kind of conceive of a strategy in the abstract, that is like, it's really a strategy sort of thing, does it actually pan out? Because a lot of times you're like, oh, we'll see. But strategically, well, here was our thought, was you looked at the environment at this time, and it's like late 2009, early 2010 time frame. And think back to that day. That was when the cable networks were all spending more and more on original programming. And you remember back when it was new for broadcast to have new shows on during the summer, because before it was like they'd hiatus during the summer and just show like reruns really, and then cable would have original series. And then as cable grew, and it was around that time that cable finally eclipsed broadcast in aggregate in terms of ad dollars. And so suddenly it was like, one of the things we noticed in just doing like the strategic review, we noticed, well, look, if you look at the spend, like, and obviously affiliate fees are growing, ad revenue's growing for these cable networks, but they are spending twice as much money on, it was essentially 2x the growth rate on original programming than revenue. So their cost, so they were cutting back a lot on the licensed content, but it was like, wait, wow, this is super interesting. Okay, and so then the theory was, if we can put another player in business, right, what'll that do? That'll make it even more competitive. Because number one, if Netflix joins, well, who's next, right? Is Hulu going to start spending more money on original content? Who else is going to get into the game? What's Amazon going to do? What's this party going to do? And what's HBO? What are all these other networks that are already, it's like this cage match amongst the rest of them? What's going to happen if you throw someone else in there? And so that was the goal. And then also for us being at that point, there weren't a ton of independent TV studios, right? And it was really like Sony, obviously, Lionsgate. And the funny thing was that 2 years into our existence, we were number 3 in terms of the number of shows on the air, which was crazy for us to think about at the time.
At MRC?
Mm-hmm. And so we thought, well, look, it's great if we get one of these new platforms in there, because everybody else has their own like sister studio that they're going to buy from. So maybe these folks will be more likely to buy from us. So that was the whole theory of why. And so it's interesting now to look at it and be like, well, that came true.
that worked.
Yeah, it actually worked. There are a lot more players, and they are spending a lot more money. It's kind of bananas.
It is super bananas, and it doesn't seem you can't see the immediate end yet. It's still everyone's doubling their content this year.
No, I was on a panel. I was moderating it. I asked that question to the folks on the panel. I was like, John Landgraf started talking about peak TV in 2014. And since then, it's only grown. Yeah. Like, what is it going to be that really either, is this a bubble? Is this the new normal? Conventional wisdom is it can't be. It's not sustainable. But
we don't have enough time to watch everything.
No, it's a great time to be a viewer.
And I would think a creator.
And a creator, yeah. But it's super interesting business. So yeah, I was there, part of that. It was a lot of fun. It's one of the things I think I am most proud of in my career. Just because I think it was, and again, to my point before about like really wanting to not just be someone who's like, I'm going to think kind of ivory tower strategy, where you're sitting like far removed and writing these PowerPoint decks of these grand things. It's like, I want to be able to see something through from like beginning to end. And so it was really neat to, you know, not just be part of thinking about like, well, how should we approach the television business, but then actually getting out there and like doing it and living through like our company ramping up to be able to figure out how to produce a show of that size and scope. And Lord knows there were growing pains through it, but it was incredible. It just was.
And then to go from making the deal all the way to the Emmys.
Yes, we went to the Emmys. That was fun. Yes, it was a surreal moment, I think, for all of us. But yeah, it was great.
That is great. Now I'm thinking, do we touch its demise?
I know. No comment.
Okay, we'll just move along. We all know what happened. Whatever. Okay, so after that, you went to the Bay Area for a bit?
I did. You know, 2015. Yeah, I decided, I'd been in MRC about 7 years, and I think, honestly, I was a little bit burnt out, you know, and it was such a wonderful place, and it's such a wonderful role. I had grown so much, you know. I look at my co-CEOs there, and I owe them I will always be grateful to them. You know, I think they bet on me, they helped me develop. I learned so much. They're incredible. They really are. I'm so appreciative of that experience. But, you know, I think at the same time, like so many folks that I know, I was not great at setting boundaries in my life, you know, and setting time. I mean, my career was, you know, my number one priority. I mean, I think, what was it? Someone was even saying to me, it's like this very common thing for like women who are in their late 30s who are not married or with kids. Mm-hmm. And that's when we have our midlife crisis or something. I had no idea.
Even with kids, you find yourself, if my eyes are open, I'm working.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a thing. Like I was told it was a thing, but I was like, what magazine did you read that in? But anyways.
I think it's fair to say it's a thing.
Yeah, but I was kind of what happened to me. I just was, you know, I'm like, what else? I've spent a lot of my life, this has been the thing that is my number one priority all the time, is my career. And
I think you look back and say the last 20 years went by so fast. If the next 20 are this fast, I want to be more deliberate about those 20.
And they've only accelerated, honestly. So no, I kind of thought, I need to take some time and remember who I am outside of like doing all of the things that I've been doing. Mm-hmm. And I want to take some time and travel. And, you know, I was in a relationship, I still am, but we were long distance between like the Bay Area and LA. And so I just felt like, well, you know what, if I'm going to take some time off, like, why don't I take some time off up there? And so I traveled for a bit, moved up to the Bay Area, and then spent some time, you know, took a little bit of time off. Of course, started doing some consulting and was going back and forth between here and the Bay Area. And it was lovely. It was really good to kind of connect with a different side of myself to some degree, you know, because I think in this industry, in the field that I'm in, it's really easy to lose perspective, I think, quickly and just become so like, it feels, I think in anything that you do, it's easy for that world to become like, you know, you're almost trapped in a little snow globe and you don't get it. And so for me, it was great to get a little bit of a perspective reset. And
what did you do?
Oh my gosh! Well,
did you go to yoga?
I did. I started going to yoga 4 times a week, which was crazy.
Yeah. Was it hard to kind of slow down a little bit?
Oh yeah, it was. But I tend to dive like headlong into things sometimes, you know, where I'm just like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get this, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm going to relax. I'm going to, you know.
I'm doing this.
I'm really doing this. I'm going to do yoga. I mean, one thing was, it's like, I'm going to take sailing lessons. I discovered I hate it. Like, I get really seasick. So I had to take, you know, at the end of every day, it was just like I was still on the boat for several hours. I had these visions of, oh, okay, well, you know, sailing the San Francisco Bay on the weekends. It looks so beautiful. I'll take my friends out and we can go like sail here or there. And then I quickly realized, I was like, wait, so they're going to be relaxing and maybe drinking rosé while I'm freaking out because, by the way, it is, I mean, the most treacherous water.
You're going to be working so hard.
No, it is so hard. It's like the hardest place in the world, literally the hardest place in the world to learn how to sail.
And now you have to keep them alive.
And I have to keep them alive and they're all having, no.
That sounds terrible.
No. So it was funny. I did that and learned that was something I did not enjoy doing. But yeah, it was nice to just take the time and try different things. One of my hobbies at one point was I decided to make bath bombs, and I won't even a lot of people got gifts of bath bombs from me for quite some time. And
You're welcome.
Of course, in terms of diving headlong into things, I think I finally tossed it. I had a gigantic closet full of bath bomb making supplies. It's like, don't start small. I'm going to make tons.
If you're going to do a thing, you're going to do it.
That's me. That's one theme. But yeah, so I did things like that. It was great. And then I joined PlayStation up there in the Bay Area. It was an interesting role. Head of strategic ventures, and it was just again, given my background obviously in on the video side of things, it was like working on kind of new business opportunities around video for PlayStation. And I was there for a little bit under a year and a half, and really great company, really lovely people, and also of course involved my spending a lot of time in LA. Mm-hmm. And I was down in LA, I guess it was last summer. And, I happened to be chatting at dinner with a friend and who was always trying to get me to come back to LA. And she said, I swear, it was like, she was like a one-woman headhunter for me, constantly calling me I heard about this. I'm like, no, I'm good. Thank you. No, I'm good. And so we're sitting at dinner and she said, look, I heard about something. And I was like, okay, what is it now? What is it? She's like, well, Hello Sunshine. I was like, wait, Reese Witherspoon's coming? She's like, yeah, that's the one. I was like, well, they're looking for kind of a CFO, COO type person. I was like, that's interesting.
That's interesting.
Okay. All right. And so I kind of just was like, oh, wait, okay, oh, yeah. The CEO, Sarah Hardin, I knew we had a lot of mutual friends, but I didn't know her really. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll ping so-and-so and see if I can find a little bit more out about what's going on, and just kind of filed it away. And then it was interesting over the next 2 days. I was in town for a week, and over the next couple of days, people kept mentioning Sarah to me. And it wasn't even about this role. It just was randomly oh. And I'm like, okay, gosh, interesting.
Time to pay attention to
I'll pay attention. Yeah, you're just kind of not to be all woo-woo LA, but we are in LA. And I just admitted that I used to do yoga 4 or 5 days a week. So I can be. And so I thought, interesting. I feel So then I'm Thursday, and I was in town for this conference. Thursday morning, I'm trying to set a conference call during the day, and I look at the conference agenda finally, and I notice 11:30 to 12, Sarah Hardin, Hello Sunshine, is speaking at this conference. I'm like, oh, wait, this is...
that's it.
This is weird. Okay. All right. Loud and clear.
Okay.
I get it. And so I go to this conference and thinking just well, maybe we'll bump into each other, but I doubt it. When you're speaking at these things, everyone mobs you the second you're done.
Right.
And so she speaks. It was funny because even during her panel, she happens to mention that she's hiring this role. I'm like, okay, so I guess this is a real thing. And so during the lunch break, it's LA, of course, most people are in the courtyard, networking. And I've had the longest week. And so I kind of said to myself, you know what, I just need a break. I'm going to go hide. And so I go, there's this room off to the side, and I plug in my phone to charge, pull out my iPad, and just start responding to email. I'm just I just need a break, decompress for a second. And there are only 4 other people in this room. Everybody else is out in the courtyard. 5 minutes later, who walks into this room except for Sarah Hardin, who had been surrounded the entire day, had been surrounded by a crowd of people. She walks in on her own. And
there was no way you were not getting this job.
I mean, it turns out the table of people, 3 of the people in the room are people who used to work with her at Otter Media. So she was coming in to have lunch with them, and I just happened to be standing at a table next to them. She walks in and she sees me, and she's like, Liz. And I was like, Sarah, nice to meet you. And I made some joke about how we clearly need to speak because no less than 10 people had told me that week that I needed to talk to her about this.
And were people talking to her about you?
That's what I found out later, because I thought, well, it's funny that she knows who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't, we know a ton of the same people, but yes, so it turned out that I think that same week someone else had said to her, you need to talk to Liz Jenkins about this. And then also I didn't know at the time that she'd gone to business school with the aforementioned Modi Witchick and Asif Sachu, who are my CEOs at MRC. And so, that helped.
Yeah.
So then when she called them and said, hey, I just met Liz, they were really positive. So that was how it all, it was just one of those things where,
That was synchronicity.
It was just like
Ridiculous.
And so that's why I was joking. I feel like I'm pinching myself. It all feels like a dream.
Amazing.
And I think that every day that I'm there, it's like, oh yeah, this is it, and this is why. And it's one of those roles where it feels like everything that I've done or learned or been exposed to was all in service or leading towards this thing. And it's just such a
moments.
I get goosebumps when I think about it
That is
sometimes.
the best.
Because it feels great. It feels right,
And then everything makes sense leading up to it. Okay, let's talk a bit about, with this mission-driven business, you have to be very conscious about creating your culture. So what are you doing to that end?
That's a great question. And it is. It's something that's really important to us as a company, especially as our company grows. We have this really neat culture book. And so we've got, our values as a company, and this book that we put together, and obviously, or maybe not obviously, one of the big parts of our business, we have Reese's Book Club, which is super popular. And so books really sit at the center of a lot of what we do. And obviously, our mission is changing the narrative for women through storytelling. And so we've got this lovely book that every member of Team Sunshine has, a copy of this book, and it's really lovely. It's got these beautiful illustrations, and it goes through, what our values are, which are kind of like, being awesome together. And that's about how we work together as a team. Or, another one is like, we're an excellence machine. And it's not just about doing, but it's about doing really well. And all of these things too are in service of what our, mission is. And so there are things like that. World-class DIYers is another one as well. It's like, the bathroom's out of toilet paper, go get more toilet paper. Don't tell somebody, down to like...
Sort it out.
Yeah, sort it out. So it's great. And there are things that we talk about every day, and we're constantly trying to improve and to be more excellent, and it's been like no other company I've ever, worked with or for, and not just because our entire senior leadership team are women, which is, amazing. And it's not something I've ever seen before. But there's a lot of intention in every single thing that we do. And it's just, and while we have, I think, the culture book, and we have a really strong set of values, it doesn't feel like it's one note. It feels like they feel really alive, and it feels like that we're all trying to, and we're all different people. We all interact differently, and that sort of thing that I think we all live them and try to live them in everything that we do. And, I think there are things we talk about we need to celebrate it more. We need to celebrate it when we see people living living the values. We need to call it out when we could do better or should do better about certain things. So it's great, again, in the same way I was talking about our mission and how that's drives us and is the filter by which we decide what to do and what not to do. I also feel the same way about our culture.
Does it feel like this is a difference having all-female leadership team makes? Or is it more than that?
I think it's more than that. I think that it's the degree of importance that is placed on this. And anyone can do it. I think that there are companies that are, Netflix, Facebook. Culture's very clear. There are culture documents out there about.
We've all read the Netflix stuff.
We've all read the Netflix one, and so I think that most companies. Well, every company has a culture.
Yeah.
It just is.
Conscious or not.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just about being intentional about it. And I think that there are a lot of companies that are, and there's some that think, oh, it's not that important.
It'll all work itself out.
And it is. It really is. And I think that oftentimes it's really easy as leaders. It's something I am really mindful of, but you always have to remind yourself, it's people. And I think sometimes you can get into a mode where you think about the people on your team or in a company as a box on an org chart, and it's really easy to forget, and I think someone asked me the other day kind of about leadership style and why, how was mine shaped or whatever. And I thought back to the first time I ever managed people. I was 22 and a half, 23. I was at GE. I was in this financial management program, and I was on my second rotation in California. And it was at this small GE business. It was an ultrasound company and the GE had acquired. And ultimately that year, GE decided to shut that business down and essentially split the operations amongst like 3 other businesses that GE owned. And so my boss, who was kind of the CFO or head of finance there, decided to leave shortly after she got a role at another company, which made sense. You know, she wasn't going to leave California. And so then I'd had a really interesting thing my first rotation where I had a manager leave and I was just alone, and I'd done really well in this really, really challenging, situation. And so I think luckily I had a really great reputation from that. So when our CFO left, my boss, who was the head of finance for the ultrasound business, called me and he's like, look, I heard about the job that you did during your first rotation. We'd love for you to step up and manage this team. I'm like, wait, what? Like, I'm not exaggerating. I'm a year out of college.
Like, but I'm a baby.
And I'm like, okay, great. Like I said, I'll dive in.
Throw me in.
Sometimes it's like, I won't say I'm blissfully ignorant. I'm like blissfully optimistic about like, okay, it'll get done somehow. I'll figure it out, And so that was what happened. And it was interesting because there were 2 women on the team, and one of the women had been there a really long time. And I don't know, probably 10, 15 years or something like that. And was super experienced. And I'm thinking, I'm half of her age. She must be
How'd she take to that?
How is she gonna handle that? Like, is this, like, how would I feel in this situation? And it was just one of those things where she's such a lovely, lovely human being. But I think there was a part of me that was like, oh my gosh, I knew that without her, like, I wouldn't be able to do this.
Yeah.
And so it was, kind of sink or swim. Like, I had to keep this, like, I could not lose her under, like, by any means. And so it just was one of those things where it was humbling for me. Just, again, I knew I was kind of in over my head. I knew I could figure it out, but I knew that I really was going to need help to do it. And I talk about how important I think it is to be, like, confident but humble. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I look for when I hire people. And, like, I need you to be confident and know that you can figure this out and have confidence in your ability, your smarts, your, creative thinking, whatever. Have confidence in that, but be humble enough to admit it when you don't know something.
Yes.
Be humble enough to ask for help and know that that's not, like, it's not a negative. It's so great.
It's not a failure.
It's not a failure. To me, it's such a demonstration of strength and confidence to be able to humble yourself and et cetera. And it's not easy, but in any case, and I think that was what that experience taught me, was like, you've got to kind of, it is so important. It's so easy to get caught up in the swirl in the day-to-day of what you're doing and to forget about every other person is also an individual that's going through whatever they're going through, that is having a reaction to every single thing that you're doing. And it just was the type of experience that made me really put a lot of my behaviors and tendencies under a microscope, because I was like, I want to be really careful about this. And I think that always kind of stuck with me to some degree.
So let's talk about a piece of what you just said.
Yeah.
How much in your career, and I'm really interested as a woman and as a woman of color in business, how much did you have to adjust your style, how you talk, how you need to present yourself to be heard, all of those things? How much of a conscious...
Oh, never. I'm just me, No, look, I think that, it's interesting when you asked me, like, well, how did I get here at the beginning? For a second, I thought about going all the way back. And the reason I bring that up is it wasn't just that I was, like, born on a cold, snowy day wherever. It's that I went to 3 different high schools. I moved around innumerable times as a kid. And it wasn't that, like, parents in the military or anything like that. We just happened to move a bunch. And then my mom was very particular about the schools I went to. It was like, oh no, this one's not challenging enough. You need to go here. But I moved a lot. And I think that I'm also, if you can't tell, an extroverted person. And so I think that, not to say that if you're introverted and you move a lot, it's not hard, but I think it's like, for me, being extroverted and wanting and craving like a lot of friends and a lot of stuff, you got to figure that out quickly if you're not going to be like, and so it just was, I think that it kind of taught me that sort of like adaptability, and I am, like, as you said, a woman of color growing up in the South, going mainly to private schools where I was one of maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, like African-American women or people, as I went mainly to all-girls school, in my classes. So, you're new and you look different and all of that. So it's a lot to kind of figure out and to navigate. And so I think that like, that shaped me a ton. It was hard. It's one of those things, like I talk about in therapy still to this day, it was hard. But, I think at the same time, it's like, it does make you stronger and it shapes you in a way. And I think that for me, what that actually like meant, I do think I'm a very adaptable person. I think that I can figure out in a situation, because you have to be. And I think, so one, I had to be for that reason, just naturally, like it was life circumstances, as well as just like who I am and being a minority and being a double minority at that. And you have to kind of, for better or for worse, and I think there are different approaches. And I think my approach has always been not necessarily to assimilate, but you've got to be, like a friend of mine called it like radical, I think there's a term of radical patience. And it's like, you've got to be, I believe you got to be inside the system sometimes to affect change. I can affect change by now where I am, being a part of setting the culture and setting the tone and setting a standard and hiring a team and influencing decision making. And that was the path that I chose to take. That was just what suited me best, and so I did. It's something that you do without, it becomes kind of second nature to some degree. It's a survival thing. But, I think anything that is a superpower is also like your kryptonite at the same time. If you're really good at being adaptable, if you're really good at navigating kind of tough situations and tough person, sometimes you're like, whoa, this isn't okay,
Right, because then does the balance become holding onto yourself and being adaptable to whatever situation, and to have both things happen, I think could be a challenge.
Yeah, it can be. And then also knowing when to draw the line to say no.
Right.
I'm not going to adapt to this. No, this is too much. No, this thing does need to change, because not everyone doesn't have the same kind of degree of like the ability to do that. It's less.
Or even the awareness that it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Okay, what do you make of the state of women in the country and in the business that has kind of happened over the last couple of years?
It's been an interesting few years. I think that it's long overdue. I think that there are things, there's been a light shown on conversations that have been happening for a long time. Some things really insidious, really terrible, horrendous, and some things that are so small that they go unnoticed or that have gone unnoticed. And I'm glad that we're in a place today where we're talking about them. And I am glad that it seems that consumers generally are also voting with their money. Because again, to my point about how do you, sometimes the best way to fix a system is from like the inside of it and knowing how the system operates and slowly changing it. And I think that this is a business. And so at the end of the day, there's going to be a ton of lip service paid to like, we should do more of this and we should do more of that in this industry. But like the thing that's really going to change it is when the dollars start like showing up for this thing versus that thing, is one. Two is leadership, right? I mean, I think, one of the things I have been struck by, I think back to conversations I used to have around like marketing and films and and you'd hear it all the time from, marketing folks. Well, we don't even really, we just need to worry about the male quadrants and how they're tracking because girls are just going to go with their boyfriends. And it's like, no. I mean, but it's
just not true.
Everyone's heard it a million times. I mean, that was the conventional wisdom for
and
a long
everyone
time.
believed it forever.
But it's,
has it ever been true?
But and it's why? Because there weren't enough women in the room having those conversations in those positions of power to say, well, maybe this reasoning is flawed. Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way. Maybe this isn't true. So, look, that's why at the end of the day, it's like you need the people who are making the decisions about how money is going to be spent, the choices of projects that are going to be made, how they're going to be marketed, to whom and where, that's what's got to change. And I think that we're seeing some of that now. I'm very encouraged in the state of California, reform that we've had around like female representation on boards. It's huge. It's long overdue. It's time.
And I can't believe it had to be legislated.
I know.
And how is it being, because I would assume, working with Reese, you're in the epicenter of the conversation.
Yeah.
How has that been?
I think that we just are living our values every day, and we're living our mission every day, and it's for real. She's for real. The company's for real. I mean, we're intentional about casting or the diversity. Like, wait, do we have, look at even talking like some of the podcasts we've had. Well, how many women of color have we had here? How many LGBTQ people? It's the real deal, and it is amazing to be a part of it. There have been a couple projects that we were developing where, our head of film was like, oh, can you take a read on this? Because I can see it. This bears some similarities to your experience. And there's stuff that I've read that we're working on. Like, I have never, ever read, and definitely not seen on screen anything that feels like more like my story or more like this is my experience or a reflection of my experience. And that is so neat and powerful, and it makes me feel things to be a part of a company that's really doing this,
Yeah. It's incredible.
And telling stories that wouldn't be told otherwise. Because that's the thing. At the end of the day, I am very fortunate. I'm very blessed. I grew up in a family where there were very clear expectations of my academic performance, and not only were there like verbal expectations, I had great role models. I knew what was possible for me,
Now, is your mother a law professor?
She just retired, and in retirement is starting her own law practice.
Of course.
Because that's what one does.
And your grandfather was a judge in Arkansas.
He was the first Black federal judge, and Arkansas Court of Appeals was appointed by Carter.
That seems pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, and so, look, I think, to me, I'm very proud of, like, what I've accomplished in my life. I feel very grateful, but I know that a lot of it's, like, I knew what was possible for me. I knew, not even was possible, I knew what was expected of me, but also it was possible, and I think, and that's the thing for me about some of these stories, it's like, for kids who don't have that luxury, who aren't going to private school, who can't see, like, role models all around them, to be able to see, like, on screen, like, oh gosh, and it sounds, I think some people think it's far-fetched, but it's true. It's like what we see demonstrates to us like, well, wow, this is possible. And so to me, feeling like the opportunity to bring stories, be they fiction or nonfiction, to screen that will show women, adults, children everywhere what is possible, what is achievable, I think it's important. It's an important step in making real change.
It's so important. And it's so simple.
Yeah.
Okay, I have two more questions for you. I've kept you more than an hour. One is, what advice do you have for women just coming up?
I think it's like, that's what I was saying about like the network and friends. And it's like, and I hate using the word network because I think it just, to me, it has like a kind of skeezy, like,
How about tribe? How does that sound?
Yeah, it's better. I don't know, but then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so woo-woo. But it's just like, it's not, I don't know, I feel like networking feels like it's very like mercenary. Like, I'm going to build this network, this Rolodex. And it's not even that, but I think it's about relationship. And in the same way that like we have relationships throughout our lives and people that we can call for ask for advice on, like, how to bake something, how to make something, how to, try, whatever it is. I think that the same thing is super, super important in our career. And I think a lot of times for women it's challenging because there often are other demands, and like maybe you're expected to be the one at home doing, this, that, or the other. And having, a drinks after work and a dinner after that is sometimes, or if you're dropping the kids off or getting to that breakfast, but I think it is as important as however many hours you're spending, from 9 to 6 or whatever, the office, is developing those relationships. And I remember when I was at MRC and I got my first review, and that was the feedback that I got, was like, you need to work on developing your network out here. And I was like, what? Because everything I'd done to date, you kind of had a network within the company and you knew some people externally, but it wasn't like you had to know, and it made such a difference to being in a smaller company, being able to pick up the phone and call so-and-so at this studio and ask this question or ask that question. So I think that is the number one piece of advice I would have is network. It doesn't have to feel mercenary. It's really it's about building relationships with people and get to know people. And a lot of times I think either we think that we need to have every answer. In the same way I feel like I was like, okay, well, first, before I do this, I need to prepare in this way and I need to have this knowledge. And it's great. I think it's served a lot of us very well. But also it's I think it's great to figure out how to ask for help and and have folks to tap into, because not even 6 degrees, probably 3 degrees of separation from you, 2 degrees, you have the answer at your fingertips to everything you probably need to know, and so I think it's really being able to kind of like tap into that.
Well, someone told me from a LinkedIn workshop they went to, we are all 3 degrees away from Oprah. So there it is.
That's exciting.
You're probably much closer. What did I not ask you about that I should have asked you?
I don't know. I feel like you covered it all. I'm like, is there another pearl of wisdom? I'll be reflecting on this in the shower tomorrow morning, which is when I do my best thinking. And then I'll be like,
up and say,
oh my
another
God,
thing.
Julie, I got it. You didn't ask me this. Yeah, let me keep thinking.
Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you for taking the time and coming. This is fun to chat about.
This is so fun.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Liz Jenkins for sharing her story. And special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on your favorite podcast provider and leave a review. And of course, on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out in letters, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can also follow us on all the social media platforms. And now, stay tuned for a sneak peek of Catch a Break. This is Catch a Break, the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating Hollywood. This is a podcast series, but it is so much more than that. Here are the founders, Jeanette Volturno, Jessica Malanofi, Shirley Davis, and Marcy Brown, explaining in their own words.
After being in the industry for a long time and having a lot of people come up to me asking me, can I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain and find out how you got your start and how you navigate this industry, I thought I would really like to give back. So the best way to do that was to figure out a way that we could distribute information that would be the same information that a lot of people are wanting to know, but not necessarily asking the right questions. Because a lot of people will have that coffee with me and start asking questions and not really understand what it is that they're looking for. So this was a way to have fun with my friends and give back to the people that are like what we once were. And it's all the things that I wish someone would have told me when I was coming up in the business.
I think it could be new people starting out in the industry who've never been here before, and that could be new graduates, or it could be people all across the country that are, making a career transition, or who always have had that desire to work in the film industry and have never quite had that chance yet. Our goal is to kind of speak to all of those people, and maybe even there are people in the film industry already who want to move from one side of it to another and make that shift, whether it's going from on set to in the office or vice versa or something like that. So I hope that we can be helpful to a really wide audience.
We're going to be covering topics that would inform a film school curriculum. We're going to start from the beginning, basic questions of how do I get in the door? And we'll give specific information so someone can actually activate once they listen to our podcasts, and follow up with different segments of the industry so everybody can get a better sense of production, the different crafts, the different ways producers function, directors function. We'll cover many different facets of the industry so that it's our version of a film school.
I like sharing information and I like giving people opportunities. So maybe what we have here can make people think of a new place to look, I didn't know I could do that either within themselves, or a new path to go down. I didn't know that was available to me. And just another avenue for people to have access.
I'm super excited that it's an opportunity for us to talk candidly about what you can expect and what you cannot expect for certain things, and sort of rules of the road, and pulling back the curtain on the industry. And we are actually catching a break in the industry. So you're getting the behind the scenes, peel back look of all of the things that you wish you would have known but weren't taught. And that's exciting for us. It's exciting for us to share that.
We'll have a great series of panelists. I think it'll change from episode to episode, but we'll try to be diverse about it, and different ways that people came into the industry, and different jobs that people currently have in the industry, and different perspectives about things.
And we're going to have bonus material. We're going to have spreadsheets and worksheets and videos, all the things to make sure that you have everything you need to make it in this business.
It's all those pieces that people aren't talking about.
And I think there's a disconnect sometimes between the knowledge that you do get from film school or from reading books.
This is like life.
Yep.
This is like practical life learning and working in this industry. That's what it is.
We have an incredible group of panelists lined up for season 1, and we're going to have lots of juicy conversations about all the topics that you need. We're going to talk about getting your first job, how to get an internship, what do you do once you get your first job, do you need representation, and if you do, how do you get it, how do you manage your finances while you lead a freelance life. We're going to cover so many topics. It is going to be so great. You should subscribe right now on our website at catchabreakpodcast.com so you will know when we launch and you won't miss an episode. I am Julie Harris Walker. I am your host, and we know that this is going to help you catch a break.